Once she had been young, and hope was everywhere. It had lived in every corner of her world. It grew like wildflowers in open meadow, and pushed up through rock to reach the sunlight. It was so plentiful and stubborn that it had seemed impossible to kill. Once. Elined stared at the cold stars and tried to remember that brief moment in time so long ago when her world was a song. For 6 months she had lived in that song. 6 months, 2 weeks, and 2 days. "And about 13 hours, I think," she said to the stars. How amusing that she could remember such a thing. Even more amusing was how she had once fervently believed she would never forget a single moment of those 6 months, 2 weeks, and 2 days, and 13 hours. Whenever she thought of him over the years, 18 years, she whispered at the stars, she thought mostly of the end. At first, just after it was over, she could not bear to remember the hours of lying in his arms, knowing he was lost to her forever. Then she spent a fair amount of time forcing herself to remember the bliss, to stare long and hard at every beloved moment until it no longer hurt. After that, she thought of it no more. Except for the end. No, not the end. The decision itself to end it. That was what she most often thought of. She recognized the weakness in herself caused by this oversight, this hole in the fabric of memory. If she was to go forward, no matter the path, she must correct this. It was an essential wisdom to preserve the ugly facts as well as the pleasant ones, to guard against selecting and discarding details on a whim. Now, with the cold seeping into her and a decision to be made by morning, now she would make herself think of all those things that went into the ending. But to think of the end was to remember the beginning. It was remembering the way he had looked at her with a shining admiration she had never seen from a man. "You are made of spices that tempt a man's tongue," he had said to her, and an unholy thrill had run through her. She could only dimly recall the sensation now, but she did not forget its power. He had looked at her mouth, and she was filled with an aching thirst, as though she would die of it, as one in a far and scorching desert. He had seen it, and let her go. That was the moment, she thought years later. That was when her heart began to slip away from her, escaping her control and landing squarely in his hands. Why? Because he did not reach to take her, but allowed her to reach for him. Because he had not flinched from her vehement political posturing. Because he did not see her as a great lady, or an obedient wife, or an indulgent mother. He saw only a woman, and desired her. It was a lure she could not, in the end, resist. "Young Godfrey could not take his eyes from you," Elined had made a point to say to Matilda. This was important to remember, lest she fall into a belief that she had been an innocent seduced. Also, it served to remind herself that she had always been cunning, even then. Robert had come to Torver to woo the young Matilda, and when he abandoned pursuit, the girl seemed likely to make trouble for him. So Elined had pushed Matilda into the path of a boy from the household guard. She whispered to the boy that he was not wrong to hope, and she sighed with Matilda over how handsome and gallant Godfrey was, until Matilda was ripe for the plucking. "Wear your red gown," she urged the girl one night, "and leave your throat bare. See if you cannot tempt him." And while Matilda's eyes were thus turned to some utterly forgettable boy, Elined slipped away from the feast and was kissed.